As I mentioned, the Independent Commission for the Remuneration of Public Office-Bearers has recommended a 3% pay rise across all categories of public office-bearers. This is despite National Treasury's warning that the fiscus is already overburdened by the public sector wage bill. But labour unions are convinced that the 3% increase is too low. Tonight we explore if it's justified in the first place, and that, of course, the other issues raised by the various other departments, including the judiciary, are valid issues. Here to talk to us on this, I'm joined by Cosatu Deputy President Michael Shingange, social justice activist Mark Heywood can be with us tonight also on this conversation on Twitter at Newzroom 405. Otherwise, the WhatsApp number 072-110-5584. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Closely linked, of course, to this conversation on remuneration has been this impact and effect of the COVID-19 pandemic over the last 24 months and the prevailing national state of disaster. So your immediate reaction, I suppose, to the lifting of the national state of disaster. Mike, let's start with you.
Well, and good evening to yourself and the viewers. Well, as has been expressed by various stakeholders, the sooner we go back to the economic activities in this country, the better. However, we hope that it's scientifically based so that we don't experience another upsurge that will require that the economy is to be closed again. Because we definitely know that the economy can no longer afford this stop-start thing. But we do welcome the fact that workers will be able to go to work and earn a salary. We do also accept and welcome the fact that those who are unemployed will once again start to travel and look for jobs, unlike there's been for the past two years. But we hope that we don't experience another upsurge on the COVID infections.
Yeah. Do you think this in any way will serve, maybe not in the immediate remuneration increases, but maybe in the future to alleviate some of the pressure that government has been pointing to as far as the policy fiscal situation in the country?
Well, the important thing is that most South Africans need to find job and work. The important thing is that the COVID-19 pandemic should not be used going forward as an excuse for employers to retrench workers. So for as long as the economic activities are allowed, we think that workers can be able to earn a salary. For as long as economic activities are allowed and there's freedom of a movement where unemployed people can go around and look for jobs. So that's the first important thing. And of course, once the business are able to continue to make a business and make profit, we hope that they're not going to be that stingy. They're going to accept that the things are booming, and therefore workers must at least benefit, particularly recover from the losses that they've suffered over the past 2 years. Because you remember, Thabo, that government has been giving these businesses a number of other reprieves, that which was not going to the workers. You will also remember that the economy of this country has been mismanaged long before COVID-19 or long before the state of the nation disaster, or in fact long before we had a lockdown. So as businesses want to recover from the economy, it is important that people remember that workers themselves need to recover from the losses and from the sufferings of the COVID-19, including the mismanagement of the economy before COVID-19.
Yeah. I'll come back to you in a moment on the recommendations of the Commission. But Mark, let me get your immediate reaction as well. The restrictions, I suppose, where the hope was that they will be completely removed. But it doesn't seem at this particular point that all restrictions will be removed. Maybe they might still be existing within the National Health Act in some form, shape, or way. But ultimately, we are no longer under a national disaster. What's your reaction from civil society?
Well, I think, good evening, Thabo. I think that it's a good thing. I think that the lifting of the national state of disaster is overdue. It should have been lifted months ago. But I think, a crucial message that needs to be stressed to everybody in this country as we resume normal economic activity is that there is no cause for complacency. As the President said this evening, the virus is still in circulation. We expect a fifth wave imminently, I would say. And although we assuming at this stage that the fifth wave will be like the fourth wave, which is that it won't come with very, very high levels of death and severe disease, we can't just automatically take that for granted. And therefore, a critical message has to be still that it's necessary for everybody to get vaccinated, and it's necessary for government to continue, in fact, not to continue, but to scale up its efforts to reach millions of people who are still not vaccinated, not necessarily because they're hesitant, but often because they are poor and undocumented, and in places where, believe it or not, it remains difficult to access COVID-19 vaccines. So, a good thing, but with a whole set of qualifications about what it is still required of you and me and the people of this country to do to make sure that we don't return to a disastrous situation again.
Mike, let's bring you back in here. Of course, it's not the pandemic that brings us into a situation where the Independent Commission for Remuneration of Public Office-Bearers is recommending a 3% increase across the board. It's the fact that the fiscus or the economic status of the country in general is in a polis situation at this particular point due to corruption, due to maladministration, mismanagement, and so on and so forth. So what do you make of the input given by Treasury? Treasury actually suggested that a 0% salary increase must be considered for all categories. And I'll tell you why. Because they say in their submission, the public office bearers remain protected as their salaries and benefits were not even affected by the pandemic. And they are, for most part, the most generously compensated cohort compared to other countries of relative size of the economy as the one that we have. But also, they're saying there's been unrestrained salary increases in the past which have stifled the growth, and especially where they were not accompanied by a corresponding improvement in as far as performance of the economy and the government. How do you respond to that?
Well, if we had our way, we will ask the President Ramaphosa to reject the recommendation of the Independent Commission. By the way, that is not independent, because this cohort of public representatives or public employees, if you like, are the only people who have got an opportunity to sit in a commission that is supposed to be independent, research, and therefore recommend what they think they are worth of. None of the public servants have got such a luxury as the judges they have. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, like Treasury, you say it's saying now here, that these are the very same politicians and the judges, by the way, from the Labour Appeals Court to the Constitutional Court, who have said, agreeing with all the ministers in cabinet, that I don't think that public servants must receive salaries. These are the same people who took a decision in 2020 to effect no single salary increase for the employees in the public service, the nurses, the doctors, the porters, the workers in Home Affairs, the workers in Justice Department. All those workers, according to these politicians that today wants 3% increase, felt that despite the inflation of 2020, the workers did not deserve any salary increase, despite the fact that there was an agreement which workers have negotiated and agreed with the employer. They didn't think there must be an increase. So there has been an inflationary erosion of the earnings and the capacity of spending of the workers. These are the people who, all of them, without exception, every cabinet minister signed an affidavit to the Constitutional Court fighting that public servants must not get a salary increase. And the judges who today stand to benefit the 3% increase agreed with them. Surely, if this is not an assault in the class war, I don't know what else it will take. The World Bank has just released a report just now that South Africa, as we've always known, is the most unequal society in the world in terms of the earnings of the CEOs, but of the politicians. A mere nurse and the police in the public service will have to work over 9 years to just get an annual salary that a politician is getting today as we speak. But here they come, they say to us as taxpayers, including those who are public servants, no, continue to pay us tax. We actually want a salary increase ourselves, but we don't deserve it. Even at a time when they say the public service wage bill is so bloated. It is these people who say, much as we are not there in the frontline service delivery point, but we do think that we deserve a salary increase. Then lastly, as you have said, the perks they have, which we think that are unnecessary and unjustifiable, they don't pay the transport to go to work like an ordinary worker in the public service does. They have free houses. They have all sorts of ridiculous medical aids that I have. Something that the ordinary public servant is struggling using their salaries. 27% of the salary of public servant is spent on transportation to work. These are the public servants who are in the middle, what we call missing middle. Their kids can't go to school because they don't qualify NSFAS. But they are too poor to can finance their higher education. Their kids themselves can't access houses because they are too poor to get the loans from the banks. But they are also too rich because they want for the state. They don't qualify for RDP houses. Yet you have got these politicians and judges who will conspire in court to deny public service salary increase, but they think today they deserve a 3% increase when they could not even give 2% for the public servants last year. We think it's very ridiculous. If we had powers, we will say to the president, he shouldn't even accept such a ridiculous proposition.
Let's bring you in here, Mark. I mean, what do you say to this? The unions are saying this is the elite declaring a war, a class war against taxpayers and the poor. So the very same Treasury that says, of course, there should be a 0% salary increase across the board, is also saying this zero salary increase should not stay for too long because, you know, low level, for example, MPs and MPLs and so on and so forth are beginning to lose morale. So it might not be a good thing to cut their salaries in perpetuity. I mean, I'm not sure how genuine are they in this cry that they are putting out of affordability.
Look, I can only agree 150% with Cosatu on this. And I think that the President should hear Cosatu and others and should reject this proposed 3% increase, and he should do that as early as tomorrow morning. Because I think that the longer this offer stays on the table, it demoralizes, it polarizes, and the people it really demoralizes is the very public sector workers upon whom this country really does depend, like doctors and like nurses and like teachers, who often, I think, give far more value to governance than these politicians. You know, just to quantify it, Thabo, for President Ramaphosa, a 3% increase would mean nearly 90,000 rand a year on top of his existing salary. For a deputy minister, and we all know how mostly useless deputy ministers are, who currently earn in the region of 2 million rand, it would mean an extra 60,000 rand per year. Now, 60,000 rand or 90,000 rand as an increase is more than the vast majority of people in this country earn in the first place. So, you know, it's very bad taste for this commission to suggest this. It's very bad taste to suggest it a few days after Stats South Africa last week showed that levels of hunger in our country are at unprecedentedly high levels. So I think it's very, very disturbing, and I think the sooner that President Ramaphosa rejects it and also accompanies that with a statement about where our priorities and our values should be in this country at this moment in time, the better.
Back tonight, looking at the remuneration of public office bearers, a recommendation made by the Independent Commission that 3% be considered across all categories. Cosatu Deputy President Michael Shingange with us tonight, as well as social justice activist Mark Heywood. I find the recommendations, or at least the input from COCTA, quite interesting, Mike, and I wonder what you are reading into what they are saying here. They are actually calling for an investigation into the actual cost of compensation for municipals and the affordability of it. As they are saying, most of the municipalities are currently financially in distress. I read that to say that if we actually were to do an investigation, we would find that the actual cost of compensation for municipalities is quite unaffordable or unaffordably high at the moment, considering that they are in distress. How do you read that? What's your interpretation of their submission?
We're against them making such a statement firstly before they make that investigation. You will understand that if they were to be saying, now, this is what we have found. We have been calling as Cosatu, particularly the public sector unions, for what we call the quality of the expenditure in government. Because when you say the public service wage bill is too high and you're only targeting the frontline public servants, you're not taking into totality all those who derive their earnings from the same public payers, of course, like municipalities, but also the entities that are owned by the state, including the entities that are linked to mother body departments like your SANRAL, your NHLS, your SAS, and all those things. All those entities themselves are supposed to be linked to the totality of the public payers. But we have also said there's a mismanagement of what we call goods and services in the public service. There is no one who's ever wanting to know the wastage that goes into and the ridiculous what we call inflation of prices on the things that the state procure vis-a-vis what you can get on the private sector every time when you want to procure something. So, and including the wastage that goes into the ICT procurement and the litigations and so on and so on. Our view is that it is not correct to target the public servants in terms of the wage bill only, while you don't look at the quality of the expenditure that government does. So we welcome the investigation about the expenditure and the affordability thereof, but it shouldn't single out the service deliverer or the frontline workers. It should go out to the totality of the expenditure, including that of the politicians, that of the CEOs of the state-owned entities, including the boards that are there, the bonuses they give themselves every year in and year out, and like I said, including the judges themselves and the goods and services that the state spends money on. So that let's have a comprehensive review of expenditure. Don't target the poor workers in order for you to save money. It's unacceptable. It's unethical if you ask me.
Yeah. The judges, Mike, still with you, and you have, of course, been quite scathing towards the judges, but they are actually saying their salaries should be considered separately from other public office bearers, and they are arguing that over the years, I think since 2018 or so, their salaries have eroded by 20%. In fact, they are saying this is unconstitutional.
This is not the first time that we are here. I think 3 or 4 years ago we have had this debate when judges themselves have proposed a 4% increase. And we argued that they appoint a judge to be a chairperson of this so-called independent commission to recommend what they think they are worth, when there's no any other public servant who has got such a privilege. That's number one. But number two, like Mark has been saying, a 3% of a judge as things stands now, what does it amount to vis-a-vis an ordinary public servant out there? But thirdly, whose salary has not been eroded over the past few years? When they want to argue that their salary has been eroded, whose salary? I just told you now that despite the existing collective bargaining agreement, the government decided to walk away from it in 2020 despite the inflationary erosions, despite the increase on personal income tax, despite the increase on the medical aid, everything else the public servants are confronted with, they decided not to increase a single cent to the public service payers. And when this matter was contested, the judges themselves, they agreed with the state that the state has no money. In fact, in the Constitutional Court judgment, one of the things that the judges are saying is that public servants are actually ungrateful because they've been benefiting in 2018, 2019 during coronavirus. They are saying that public servants are ungrateful. How grateful are the judges are today that they can think that they deserve a 3% increase when they've just told cleaners in the hospitals, those who clean our hospitals, that they are ungrateful for demanding a salary increase during coronavirus? So whose salary has not been eroded over the past few years?
Mark, I find this quite interesting. I might wonder if we could extend this degree or this level of reasoning across all salaries that have been eroded to say This is quite unconstitutional that our salaries, because of poor performance, I suppose, of some of the ministers and so on and so forth, that have cost us our economy and our salaries to an extent that them being eroded in such a manner, it's unconstitutional.
Well, I think there is actually an important argument, Thabo, to be made, that not about the salaries of politicians and judges, but about the salaries of the ordinary public servant. And I think that the Constitutional Court judgment that Mike keeps referring to was a very unfortunate judgment. It's our law now. It was the judgment of the Supreme Court. But, you know, at the end of the day, President Ramaphosa and others keep on talking about a capable state. But a capable state depends first and foremost on a capable public service. And the capability of the public service, as far as I'm concerned, depends upon recognition and proper remuneration of public servants, and particularly those people who work the front line of public service. And if you don't remunerate people properly, then you get a deterioration in the quality of services, which are in fact socio-economic rights, such as basic education, such as health. And as those services deteriorate, it has an impact on the economy and on livelihoods as a whole. So mismanagement, suffocating or starving the public service, in fact, turns the whole constitutional design upside down. So I do think that there's a need for a comprehensive rethink about where our priorities are. You know, I don't think it's good enough to just talk about, glibly always, about the public sector wage bill without breaking down, well, who is getting most of the money in that public sector wage bill? What is the top versus what is at the bottom of that public sector wage bill? But also, Thabo, we need to quantify what it costs and be realistic about it, what it costs to run a modern state in the 21st century. Our modern state needs to be sophisticated. It needs to be able to deal with all sorts of threats and challenges and opportunities, etc. But if it's broken, it can't do any of that. So I think, you know, it becomes self-defeating to do what the Treasury has been doing, which is imposing austerity on public services and on public servants, and continuing to tip their hat, as it were, to the interests of rich people who frankly don't need this extra money. It's just like pocket money for them. They can squander it here and there. Makes no difference to their actual quality of living.